So, hello everybody, and this is the beginning of Grief Awareness Week. So I'm delighted you've joined us, and we kind of all recognise, and I'm sure why you're here, is that these happy holidays like Christmas, or these meant to be happy holidays like Christmas, are often difficult when we're grieving. I'm Julia Samuel. I'm a psychotherapist and author of Grief Works and the Grief Works app. And the Therapy Works podcast. And Amber, you're going to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. I am Amber Jeffrey, the creator and the founder of the Grief Gang podcast and online community. And I'm really, really happy to be here with you, Julia, and everybody else here today.
So, I mean, the question, why is the holidays particularly hard? In some ways, it's sort of obvious, but I think it's worth naming that, of course, our memory is very heightened, and Christmas, with the weather, the sight, the sound, the smell, our body remembers, our body holds the score. So the moment we kind of start seeing Christmas trees and presents, and it throws us back in time to memories of when the person that we loved was alive. And that might have been a few months ago, it might have been last year, it might have been 20 years ago. And of course, the distance of time can change it, but it doesn't stop the presence of absence, of missing that person. And I think what we're going to look at, Amber, is how, given that this is such a mix, like you maybe want it to be happy, or you may not want it to be happy, but how do we best navigate it? Why do you think Christmas is hard, Amber?
You touched the nail on the head as soon as you said the body keeps the score. That really, really spoke to me, because that's very much where I've been feeling at the moment. Of you may even I think I remember the first Christmas after my mum passed away, of actually wanting it to be a really joyful and celebrative time, but my body wouldn't let me. My body was like, no,
let people know what the sort of feelings in your body are. What are they like? Is it
dread, like really tense and
a heavy feeling, isn't it?
And that was from first year. Now I'm now 6 years in. It's come back round again this Christmas, and that's been really strange to navigate through, because I've been semi-okay the last couple of Christmases, and as you said, just then, I see things and your body keeps the score. My body has most definitely been keeping the score at the moment, and the sight of a Christmas stocking the other day just made every muscle in me tense up and just go back to a younger child, and envisioning my mum putting a stocking out. And I think it's around Christmas time, why it's so difficult is because just everything does remind you of what once was, and what in your mind should still be here. Your person should still be here at the dinner table, at the Christmas festivities, out shopping with you, whatever it may be. It's just a painful reminder of what should have and could have been potentially. And then also too, what I've been finding, what makes it really difficult, is the outer world and how Christmas is portrayed in media, commercials. Is sometimes it's the perfect 4.2 family. Every nanny and granddad is still alive, every parent is still alive, every sibling, everyone's alive. And you look at it and you think, well, that's not what my Christmas looks like anymore.
And it's probably what most people's Christmas has never looked like, to be honest. I mean, that perfect Christmas has probably never existed.
Even if people are alive, even when you talk about living losses a lot, and kind of the living losses of
divorce.
Exactly. So even for people who have all their loved ones still alive and healthy and well, these often 2.4 families depictions on TV and social media, it's like, it's not true. There's blended families, there's divorced families, parents who hate each other but have to come together for the children. So yeah, I think Christmas, it's just a really sometimes painful reminder of what should have been, and it's tricky to navigate through.
And I think one of the things sort of within a family is, if you think of the family as a family system, as the siblings of the person that died, or the children of the person that died, or the grandchildren, or the, you know, the child, whatever the relationship, the people that remain tend to grieve differently from each other. It may be because they're a different generation, it may be because they have different life experience, different personality. And I think that as a family can be really hard to kind of connect and allow the differences, you know. So if you have a brother who wants to dance at Christmas and party and be with his mates, and you think, how could you be doing that? Mum has died. Or the other way around, or your parent, you know, wants to kind of put on a show, and you're like, Mum, for goodness sake. And so I think what really helps is kind of sitting around the kitchen table as much as you can together, collaboratively naming your differences and allowing the differences, that there isn't one right way to grieve, there isn't one right way to solve a problem. But in naming them, you may be able to come together with some kind of plan of what accommodates and allows the differences. So that you don't, because I think the fights happen because when, as we said, the body holds the score. So the pain surges through your body, and often it's expressed as anger, like, oh, this is hurting me, or as fear, like, oh, this is going to hurt me. So your system is on high alert. So your impulses, your capacity to drop your impulses and not hit out are much harder to do. So if you can gather together before and slow down, where you have your thinking mind available to kind of think, like, what can we do? So are there 2 or 3 things that we as a family can share together, whether it's sitting down to the meal, where it's sharing who's going to do the tasks, and ways of remembering the person. Like if you can agree on lighting a candle and having a photograph, or saying a poem, or each of you standing up and saying something that represents their absence and marks their absence together, then you have those touchstones of connection where you feel close enough, but also allowing different.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's like saying that and doing that, it's all so well and good, isn't it? And I so wish I could have heard you about 4 years ago. And I think sometimes the difficulty with that, although we know, yeah, you're creating those touchstones and bringing your person into the room, into the celebration, even if you don't want to overtly celebrate your person, or, you know, really make a song and dance, just these small touchstones. But I think sometimes what's the difficulty with that, of having those conversations, is it's expressively acknowledging that our person isn't here, and we need to talk about what are we going to do at Christmas this year, because sometimes people may avoid having that conversation and that honest conversation of, right, how do we want to bring mum, granddad, brother into the picture here, because for some it's just get through it, just get through the Christmas. We know they're dead and they're not here. Acknowledging of how we want to bring them into the room is outright saying they are dead and they're not here for Christmas. So sometimes it's that little hurdle, I think, to get through, of like, we do, the elephant in the room here, we do need to talk about it.
I mean, that's what I'm going to say is, by not saying anything, you don't deal with it. And we can't, you know, you can't fix grief, but what we don't face remains kind of toxic, and is the emotion beneath what's going on the outside that is much more likely to explode. So although there may be, you know, numbers of members of your family from different generations who do not want to talk about it, just even naming it in a kind of plan beforehand. And I would say, do not do this by text. Ideally, do it in person.
What method would you say? How do we all get together, and how?
I would do it on a Zoom. If you can't be in a room together, I would do it on a Zoom.
Family Zoom.
Because you have, like, you can have, and you agree a time. So, you know, having the boundary of time, like half an hour, and you can look at practicals, who's doing the shopping, but you can look at the emotionals, the practicals and the emotionals side by side.
They can kind of in and be like, we need to talk about food shop, and be like, oh yeah, and FYI, how are we going to remember mum? Be like, oh, I thought we were talking about the turkey today, and you're like, no.
But I think both. It's how you treat it. So if you treat, how are we going to talk about mum, with a lot of drama, that kind of imbue, you know, emotions are contagious. That gives the drama, and everyone goes, oh my God, talking about mum. But actually, if you can, in the planning bit, be quite cognitive and quite kind of pragmatic, like, how are we going to talk about mum? You know, that,
yeah.
How do you want to? I had this idea. What do you like? Shall we do a bit of both? What you know, maybe I'm going to go to the grave the day before. Anyone want to come with me? I might take some flowers. I spoke to a client yesterday, and they took candles to the grave for Grief Awareness Week, and flowers, and took her son. And that's a lovely thing to do. And he liked going with her. Somebody else hates going to the grave. So there isn't a right or a wrong.
Absolutely. Goes in quite well. What can go wrong when bereaved families do come together, or when obviously not having these conversations, because okay, we can all sit together, we can say, right, how do we want to memorialize our person at Christmas? And one may have a particular vision of how they want to do it, and another a different. And I think that's where sometimes the butting of heads can come in. I know that from experience of, I remember some Christmases where I wanted to memorialize mum in a certain way, maybe through the cooking or the music or the games that we played. And other people had different ideas of how they wanted to. But in my mind, looking at them, I felt it wasn't good enough in my eyes, and it wasn't the way how I wanted to do it. And thinking that even maybe they're more subtle or not as maybe elaborate expressions weren't a clear indication of how much they missed her. But actually taking back, and in hindsight of realizing that however anybody wants to remember somebody on Christmas and around this time is totally okay, and to be respectful of that, obviously, as you just said, of the lady who likes to go to the grave and the person who doesn't. One is not wrong, one is not right. It's just what people enjoy. And in families, I think, and around these festive times, it's a lot about respecting sometimes some people's
differences and different, yeah. And I think the kind of often the build up to the day, so you know, once we're in December, it begins to build up, and there's that sort of Jaws music in your system, that doom, doom, doom. And I think what helps, kind of as you get closer to the day, like Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and Boxing Day, is if you think of your body as a you know, grief hits you in kind of waves and comes through your body. So if you can do practical physical things that are circuit breakers, so you're in a heightened state, you're in a lot of pain, you feel very angry or upset or frightened or all of those things at once, furious. Circuit breakers really help bring your system down so that you're not so exhausting to be with in yourself as well as everybody else. It's like,
because you have to
like going through your day like that is really, and you're clenching your teeth and not enjoying any of it. So circuit breakers are things like even a 5-minute exercise, go outside, move your body. 20 minutes helps. A 5-minute breathing, breathe in for 4 and out for the count of 8. That slows your system down. Getting hugs. I read in a book the other day, 20-second hugs regulate your system. So you co-regulate, you have a hug, 20 seconds.
No more, no less.
You can do more, but less isn't as effective. And then also create your, what I would call kind of mini rituals that work for you. So they're little islands of calm, and it might be that you go off and you listen to a song. It might be that you have a little ritual around making your cup of tea, that kind of, you imbue that with a kind of, you know, rituals are like habits with soul. Like you have your nice mug, your special tea, you boil the kettle, and this is your moment of giving yourself a treat. So intentionally doing things that soothe and comfort you, and doing them in small moments through the day, is really helpful in keeping you not kind of going off
up here all the time. Because yeah, as you said, of kind of, you know, the days kind of, I feel like just the whole month of December can be quite a write-off for people around this time. People think, okay, just get through Christmas Day, get through Christmas Day, but actually sort of the grief hangover that comes after that. And then we're into New Year's Eve, and potentially, I know New Year's Eve is really a triggering time for some people, as it's if your person, the year that they've died in, you're leaving that year and stepping into a new one. So when you think of the scale of how long our body is tense from the 1st of December till the 30th, and sometimes into January, that's a long time if we are just constantly up here. So yeah, what are the little soulful rituals we can give to ourselves? It's not going to be that every day is going to be a great day and we stick to those rituals, but something just to bring those shoulders down and clench that jaw, being more self-aware. Speaking of rituals, what kind of, I'd be keen to know, kind of in your work and everything else, just kind of what rituals have you heard from people who do throughout this festive period to remember and honour their people? Because I know for some it's in really elaborate ways. I think I went big and go hard and go home in the early years of like, I love my mom and I miss my mom, and actually realising, oh God, I don't have the energy for it, and actually I can
What did you do going big, going hard? Did you, you made her favorite recipe, you had pictures of her everywhere, you
sort of, that was more, it was more the banding of everybody together that was really quite forceful of me. And if they said no or they were reluctant, I would take it as they're being really
personal.
I really took it really personally, and actually didn't factor in that maybe that was too hard for them and actually quite a bit painful, and just had this big cloud over me of like, no, we must do this to remember her and to honour her and to love her. And not, again, going back to boundaries and differences of people will remember and honour, even if you lose the same figure in your life. So me and my brother, we both lost a mother, that we will grieve for her differently and mourn for her differently, and that is okay. One is not better or worse than the other. But I think more now my rituals and kind of around this time are a lot smaller and a lot more just personable. For example, last night I was clearing underneath the bed and I found my memory box, and I just sat there and I found a bunch of letters that my mum wrote to my dad when they were first together in the 90s, and read all these letters when she was pregnant with my brother. And I sat there with a nice glass of wine, bit of Christmas music on, and enjoyed that.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and whereas before that would have been really painful for me to do, and just how interchangeable my grief is, and just in those quiet moments I felt closer than ever to her, whereas before I'd be putting on big elaborate parties to try and memorialise her. But for you, Julia, in what ways and some things have you seen in your clients, in your work, that have really touched or moved you, or been, you think, really just beautiful ways to remember people at Christmas?
I mean, many ways. So some as kind of external representation, so that they wear a piece of their clothing, like a scarf or a watch or a piece of jewelry. Another one could be they write them postcards, like little small postcards, or Christmas cards, like little messages that they put in a box. One person has a kind of box, which is like you actually use it as a table, like to put things on, but inside the box, it's a bigger box than a small memory box, are lots of her stuff. So her glasses, things that people have sent them. So if nobody knows they're there, but the presence is there, so it's not too much. Can open the box and there's a kind of smell that he goes, this is his wife, and some of her clothes and memories. And he made a kind of a collage of images and pictures, and also a photograph book. So all of that is in there. I think walking with friends, particular walks that you want to remember her and talk about her, or walks that you used to do. Obviously going into places that are significant, whether it's a church or whether it's a cafe you always went to, or a pub, or are both, every positive one, it could be too much, like you don't want to do that. And I think in the same way as allowing different ways of grieving of other people, like don't judge yourself, what you're feeling. You may feel nothing at all, you may feel numb, you may have lots of competing feelings, and don't try and get one over the other. So you may allow yourself to be sad, but actually feel furious. If you allow yourself the full soup of feelings, then, and name them and find ways of expressing them, then the emotions have done their business, and they can relax. If they keep being denied, they keep coming back until they're kind of come through your system.
No, I'm here. Yeah. Really good point you're just making there, of obviously we're here today talking about if this is a really difficult time for you of year, And something that I really began to recognize earlier in the year, specifically around my mum's anniversary, of when you actually feel okay around the times when it's societally expected of you to not. So if anybody's on here today who is actually, and maybe has tuned in just to hear and actually thinks, I feel pretty okay. The lead up, I'm doing well. I'm quite looking forward to Christmas and the festivities.
Take it, enjoy it.
Thank you.
Bring it on.
I say that all the time. I go, bloody enjoy it, because
Yeah.
you don't know. And more so,
Yes.
that is grief. And I think potentially we don't hear that enough, of that it's okay to be okay. If you feel great around this time, and whether that is, you know, when you are thinking about your loved one, it's bringing happy memories and joyful times to the front, and that makes you feel good. There is sometimes that little devil on the shoulder going, you're meant to be sad, this is Christmas and they're dead. And you're like, oh. And I had that around my mum's anniversary, and I remember really guilt tripping myself, of, because I was getting the messages of, I hope you're okay, and it's a really tough time. And I was like, oh,
I'm fine.
I'm fine. And I know around this time, if you are maybe potentially, you know, now or even during leading up, and you do start getting those messages or those calls from people, what are you doing? How are you feeling? Don't be afraid to say, I feel okay. I feel good. And that's not me dismissing my grief, or to be like, you know, I think that it might come across as maybe externally to people thinking, oh, they're okay, but are they? You're actually like, no, I really am.
And at the other end, I mean, I'm aware we need to take questions soon. The other end, if you don't want to do Christmas at all, it's too raw, it's too much, you want to go volunteering, or you want to go geographically to a different place and not have Christmas, of course, give yourself permission for that too. And I think the other thing, given that it is love and connection to others that enables us to survive and come to terms when the person we love has died, if you're a friend of someone and you've come on and you want to support a friend, you know, I think the best thing you can do is, in a way, what Amber's already referred to, is like text or show up or check in with them and saying, wondering how you are, what do you need? And don't just say, I'm here if you want me, but actually do something. Like I was thinking we might go for a walk. I was thinking I might book you a massage. I was thinking I might do some of your cooking for Christmas and give you your something, so that you don't have. So be practical and actively present. I think love in action at these times is a really good love, not just love in, maybe if you want me, let me know.
It's that arrogance of, oh, I don't want to impose. And sometimes I think when you are supporting somebody in your life, like personally, I think a little bit of imposing is okay. Just putting your face there, going, you can deny me all you want and whatever it may be, but I am here, and I am going to come and take your wash load. I am going to do your Yorkshire puddings on Christmas Day. So it's just something off your list. Kind of just putting your face there, I think is not a bad thing. Right, questions. I'm just going to quickly, my laptop.
I'm just going to read this. Thinking 3 years after my husband died, all grown-up kids at a distance, that I just won't do Christmas this year. There's pressure from others to be okay. Well, I would just prefer a quiet day, no tree, no celebration. That would be all right with me. And I think just be clear to your friends that if that's all right with you, it has to be all right for them too. So Joe is saying, what about when you feel okay but worry excessively or feel responsible for other family members? So I think in doing that, I kind of recognize the limits. You know, when you say worry excessively, I think recognize the limits of what you can help with and what you can offer, in the sense that often you can't fix or change somebody else's experience or what they're going through. The single most important thing that you can do to support them is to bear witness, to listen to them, to allow them to be who they are and let them find their own connections and ways of being that support them. So kind of be collaborative with them about what can support them, but not kind of going in to bear witness. And I think the thing of worry excessively, there's a good doctor, Dr. Sarah Vora, who talks about do your kind of worry list and write it all down. And then from that worry list, do things that you can actually do something with and do them. and then put the others off. If you can't do something with those worries, kind of shift them across. So then you're bringing down what's in the front of your mind as a sense of worry. Hello.
I'm back.
Good.
That I charged it all blooming night and it decided to die on me. Thank you for that, guys. Sorry for that.
So Rosie, so I understand how different members of the family, my two sons, have different expectations of how they want to remember their fathers, and my husband. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just in the question doc now and just reading it through. We've got one.
What's another question?
We've got one around rituals. I think you're like this. Hello, Christmas has always been such a big thing in our family. We have a lot of traditions that we have always done. I'm trying to keep all the traditions going for my children, grown up now, but it's impossible to do with so many people missing. I'm faced with trying to figure out which traditions do I just stop doing, but that feels like I am forgetting them and what Christmas used to mean. Traditions and rituals I find very, because I can very much relate to this person of finding the balance of creating your own traditions and rituals around this time, whilst with a sprinkle of before, something old, something new, something blue, something like that. And the feeling of forgetting by, for example, my mum, how she would do Christmas dinner, there's
doing
something
it differently.
Yeah, there's some things on the plate that I now probably don't put on the plate, but that she would. And I remember the first time being like, oh no, but I must, to the T, do exactly how she did. And actually, the more you try to emulate that and to try and continue those, I think that's what gave me more upset, actually, trying to continuously keep up with every tradition and every ritual, because those weren't my rituals, those were not my traditions. And so,
that you evolve.
Yeah.
Grief is adaptive and evolving, and you have to let it adapt and change you. I think where you get actually complex, stuck grief is when you're incredibly rigid about, have to do this, I only allowed to feel this, and it must be like this. The more you can allow the expansion of adaptation, of giving yourself permission for what you feel, or whether you have turnips or Brussels sprouts or whatever you have. So allow yourself to adapt. We are wired to adapt and change, and grief is an ongoing adaptation process. And so while the relationship and the love continues, your response and relationship with that, it serves you very well to let that change.
Yeah.
So Anne-Marie, do you want to read that one? I'm 33. Have you got that?
33. I was just looking at one of the questions in the question box, just on the Zoom here, of what about when you feel okay but worry excessively or feel.
I've done that one. You were off then.
Oh, I was off getting the charger. I found that one interesting. Yeah. 33. Anna's been struck. Anne-Marie. I'm 33 and my family now only consists of myself and my brother. There's been a continuous barrage of bereavement. Neither my brother nor I have children, so Christmas is literally the two of us. Christmas seems to get harder each year. I fear my brother feels compelled to spend it with me rather than friends, as we only have each other family-wise. How can I make this easier? How to make Christmas an enjoyable time when it just feels pointless and awkward?
I mean, my first response would be, can you have an honest, open conversation with your brother and ask him that question? Like, what can we both do, given that it feels a bit lonely and a bit sad, just the two of us, because so many people have died? What can we do that can bring a bit of joy? Should we join friends of mine one year, friends of yours another year? Two of us feels just a bit too much. Or could we do it that we spend the night, Christmas Eve together on our own and have supper, and then do something with other people the next day, that we break it up. Yeah. So be kind of creative and collaborative together, but I don't think you can even begin to think about it until you're honest and open and communicate with each other.
Yeah. And also as well, the note in there of, I fear my brother feels compelled to spend it with me rather than with friends. We only have each other. So kind of you're feeling that, I feel like he doesn't really want to be here with me. And maybe even saying to him, if you do want to go and spend it with your friends, that's okay. Granting him permission, because potentially your brother is feeling, well, he may want to spend it with his friends or to break up the day just a little, but obviously maybe he doesn't want to potentially upset you. So maybe even granting the permission of, it's all right if you do want to go. You'll be like, oh, thank you for saying it. Thank you for bringing it up, because I didn't want to be like an arsehole or anything or something, and just put that in position. So sometimes just granting that permission for somebody will really open up the barriers. We've got some good ones. Okay. Deaths near the holiday times. My partner died last year approaching Christmas. This year I have invitations to join family members. I know this will be a different way of spending Christmas and it may accentuate my loss. How can I prepare myself?
So I think choose carefully which family member you're going to go to, the one that you kind of feel safest with and can trust. And maybe I would have a conversation with them so that you know what they do. So our brain is always on alert, and particularly when we're grieving, looking for danger and what we don't know. So if you know what you're doing, and you can even play a video in your head beforehand of what you're going to be doing, like we get up and we have breakfast and we open presents. If you play that video, that prepares your body so that on the day you're not hit by a surge of, oh, I'm not at home, because presumably this family member, you know their house and you know their kitchen. So I think that really helps. But also have a conversation with the family saying, there may be bits that I go out from. So, you know, I'm going to try, you know, I want to have as good a day as possible, but maybe, you know, during lunch, I may get a bit overwhelmed. So don't worry about it if I just go out and have a 10-minute walk around the garden, or if I go to my room, or I go and do something else because it's too much. So just let me be me. And that will really take the pressure off me to have a happy Christmas. And whichever, because you know, emotions are contagious. If you're sitting there utterly miserable, or tears coming down your face, but you're thinking, I have to white knuckle it and eat my turkey, everyone picks it up. Much later you go, this is a bit much, and everyone goes, yeah, gives you a big hug, and you go and soothe yourself, do a bit of what we talked about before, something that's calming, and then come back.
Totally. And that's not even, you know, like, don't be not the Debbie Downer, quote unquote, but for yourself, of if you need to go and to have the big cry, to go and have the big cry in a safe place, not over the dinner table, into your food, somewhere where you can really let go. And I think that, that's really good there to set in, I say boundaries loosely here, but to the expectation to this family member of, you know, really appreciative of being able to come here and to spend this time with you, but I may not be maybe the happy-go-lucky person or the real festive Christmas Mrs. Claus this year, but I do really want to be around you. But these are maybe some of the expectations of me, and I'd like to think that with family they will totally understand that. One more cue in here around deaths near the holiday times. One more. My daughter died by suicide on the 4th of December 2019 in Vancouver, Canada. That date is also my husband's birthday. Our daughter very much knew it was her father's birthday. Now, as we approach December and Christmas, I keep asking this question: how on earth do we manage both Sophie's Heaven Day and her father's birthday? How on earth do I stop myself saying this time 3 years ago?
I mean, that's a huge question, and there are other questions here from Hamad about the death of a child. And so just to acknowledge, you know, the particular complexity and pain of the death of a child, it kind of tears up the rule book of life, that you never expect to bury your own child. And death by suicide has, you know, a particular level of complexity that's extremely painful and hard to navigate. And, you know, in asking the question, how do I both hold that particular day was the day my daughter died by suicide, and it's also my husband's birthday, I think it's not trying to do one or the other. It's as much as you can is holding both, allow both. And that will bring, you know, a big complexity of feelings. I think sometimes where you put your attention and how you frame your day and what you do in the day can be a kind of a loose structure that can hold you together. So you may decide parts of the day to acknowledge and remember and do something that represents the death of your daughter, that feels significant and loving and honors her memory and the pain of her loss, and then have a gap. And then you might later in the day do something that is a celebration of your husband's birthday. And it isn't, I think both, if you do it in a way that feels like you and feels authentic, allows then this framework to hold you when there is so much competing feelings and complexity.
For both, yeah, one doesn't have to cancel out the other. And so, yeah, if it does mean having almost like a schedule and way of kind of like a cut point of, okay, we will acknowledge.
You need a gap.
Okay, because of just such different experiences of this. One is acknowledging a death and a bereavement by suicide, and then into a celebration of life. That is to go into flip one into the other. They would need to get of a bit of a diffusing of, okay, we've acknowledged, and yeah, as you said, what feels organically right to you, of not just, in the morning then, oh, party time. If there's, we need some diffusing time here. But that is it. That's a one day of the year with a lot of big feelings in there. Big time. We've got someone here about supporting friends and people who are grieving, which I'm really excited to get into. So from P, how do I support someone who is now alone during Christmas? They are divorced and they lost their only child to suicide. They're worried about being alone, but I don't want to bother others with their grief. Any suggestions? Worried about being alone, but don't want to bother others with their grief. As we were saying earlier, of showing up for people, of you've acknowledged they're worried, they don't want to bother other people, but there are clearly
that's an assumption you don't know.
Exactly.
Check.
And when we assume that we make it out of you and me, and so we're to assume, and it's assuming that yes, that they're worried about being alone, but don't want to bother others. I think to put your face there, and as we were saying earlier, to show up in ways, these people, they are your friends, and you know what they enjoy, maybe what they don't, maybe what is too much and what's too just a bit overt, and not like your organic and natural friendship. So whether it is saying to them, shall we go out for a walk today? Shall we have a Christmas dinner, a couple of Christmas drinks together? Your friend, I think if you're close enough and have an open dialect, and trust with each other, and they'll say, you know what, I'm okay, but thank you for the offer. And to just, I think when supporting somebody, it's about, for me anyway, it was the people who just continue just to show up all the time, even in the very most small and delicate ways of, it's just a text message every morning. Saw this picture or this lovely artwork and thought of you and your mum. It wasn't sometimes always the people who were constantly, let's do this, let's do that. It was because that couldn't be every day. That wasn't, we have to work, people have dependencies. We couldn't do these sort of more active things. So it's people who elaborate and doing, and outdoors and whatever it may be. So the people who just kind of every day checked in, and whether that's maybe for your friends, and just opening that line of communication of whenever, however, I am here for you, and that it's not a bother. I think sometimes we do need reassurance in grief that we are not being a bother, because that is just I was reading actually last night I was reading Joan Didion, it's actually right here right next to me, Joan Didion, The Year of
Magic Thinking.
And the part when she's talking about self-pity, and it was screaming to me. So if anyone wants to read this, it's a really good book, Joan Didion. And there's parts about self-pity, of kind of how in grief we do kind of go into that and naturally as humans, supposedly, you know, Julia, we're kind of not wired to want to be into self-pity, into wanting to be like, poor me, boo-hoo, blah blah blah. We do kind of naturally want to escape that a little. So kind of around this time of your friends maybe not wanting to bother people, they don't want that self-pity. It's not self-pity, it's support, and everybody is granted to it.
So there's one here. Do you have any ways to make it easier to talk about your loved one with others in your family? I still find it hard to say the word mum and to talk about her with my family, even nearly 9 years after she died when I was 12. And my family don't really talk about her much either. So, I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is that there may be trauma in your system, because if saying the word mum kind of switches your whole system on in a way that kind of feels too much and overwhelm 9 years later, that there may be some unresolved trauma in your body, and grief doesn't adapt when there's trauma. So grief is naturally adaptive, but if it's trauma, it blocks that adaptive process. So I'd think about that on the one hand. And on the other, I would think about small moments of trying to do these big, difficult things is better than like having a big conversation. So picking one family member, going outside into a space and talking about your mum, and you only have to say the word mum once, but talking about a memory, and you can make the walk as long or as short as works for you. Once you've done that once, and you've recognized that the sky didn't fall in, you didn't die, you can build on it. And you can then begin to build new ways of talking about your mum, but start very bite-sized, manageable. And then, you know, and I would tell your family members what you're doing and what you're wanting to do. Someone asked me about the book for anxiety. She's also on Instagram. She's called Dr. Sarah Vora, Vohra. We've only got 3 minutes, Amber. What's the big question?
Section and just see anything more there. So thank you for that person putting the book in. Joan did,
a young child?
Yeah.
Lost a parent? How to best support a young child who's 7 through this period following the loss of a parent. They are clearly excited for Santa, but feeling extremely anxious. Christmas will only be 6 weeks after the death. We've already discussed all feelings being valid. Well, I mean, what stands out is that you're already dealing with it, and that's really helpful, and that all feelings are valid. And you'll also recognize that a child of 7 grieves. And so that in itself is probably 1,000 steps ahead of most other people. So you're doing really well and you've got good instincts. So trust in your instincts. Children need to be both allowed to grieve and be sad, jumping in the puddle, and to be happy, Christmassy, playful, getting presents, gleeful kids jumping out of the puddle. So if you can create moments and time that allow you both to be in the puddle with him and to be out of the puddle with him, and talk to him about that. You can go to Child Bereavement UK, it's the charity I'm founder patron of, and then we have a lot of resources, books, active resources that you can do, and also information that you can look up and find the needs of bereaved children at particular ages. So there is a section on bereaved children at age 7.
I love the puddle anecdote.
I think it's true of adults.
Yes, absolutely. And more so, I think when you actually think about the puddle and kind of how children do, and I heard of the theory and of how it is, but only actually really experiencing it with my nephew for the first time. And he's about 4 years old now and knows about mum and how we speak about her. And when we're in the puddle, as an adult, you're not ready for it, and just when there's no kind of sometimes signal of when this child is going into the puddle, there's no lead up kind of, whereas of adults we might be feeling a bit more off and I don't know, just more overtly. But for a child it's just into the puddle. Why did my daddy die? Oh, okay, we're talking about dad today. Daddy blah blah blah. Okay, what's for dinner?
The truth.
Yeah, I'm telling them the truth and being like, okay, and then I go, what's for dinner? You're like, oh, so you go immediately, whoop, we're here now, we're talking about whoever's died, we're here, and you might be really ready for a whimsical moment with the child, and then it's, can I have a bit of chocolate? And you're like, oh, that's the end of that then.
Can I just do one more? I know we've only got a second. Vandana, come on, your close friend died. You didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye. She was very ill and she was your closest friend. You don't have others. My suggestion to you is to join bereavement groups, something like Amber's, the Grief Gang. I spoke to an organization called The New Normal last night. They have meetings all over the world that can be online and in person. There's members of Cruise listening. You can go to Cruise to get support. But I think find a community that doesn't mean you have to kind of text people and make friends, but find a community of people who are grieving too, that are there already, so you don't have a big mountain to climb to get the support that you need.
Wow.
And
Thank
on
you.
that,
Yeah.
thank you all so much. Thank you, Amber.
Yeah, it's always fun. I always feel like we're just chatting away together. We've got a lovely bunch of people joining us. More so, if you would like to see more of us, next Wednesday, both Julia and I and Poppy from the Grief Case will be holding a live Q&A questionnaire and live talk with Julia. So do come along. The link is, I think we'll pop it in the chat just now if you want to join over there. And just a huge thank you to Good Grief Festival for having both of us, and for you for joining us and being part of the conversation today. And we really appreciate you being vulnerable and comfortable enough to share with us during this talk. Sorry for my choice.
And also to go and look at the Good Grief Festival and see the other online talks that they've been, if you need further support. It feels like there's a lot going on, the people are feeling a lot. So both, you know, you're doing it, acknowledge that you have these feelings and find ways of supporting yourself. And Good Grief Festival is a really brilliant place to find support resources and ideas and creative ways, which is what I love about it, of supporting you, and the Good Grief YouTube channel as well. So sending you all love. Maybe see you with Amber at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, but if not, see you another time. But you can find me on Instagram. You can find Amber on Instagram.
At the Grieving Gang, and you are on
Julia Samuel MBE.
There we are. We look forward to seeing you.
Lots of love, all of you. Bye.